I don't know if you guys have the same problem as me, but every time I finish a project, I always end up with a whole bunch of extra parts laying around. So today, I just threw everything I had on the table and I'm going to try to make something. I don't really know what I'm going to do yet, but as I'm thinking about it, I realize that I do have 4 arms and 4 legs. So the first thing that came to mind was a spider or crab type of creature. So I'm just going to take these parts and kind of start laying them out, see what I can come up with. On this second set of legs that I have, I'm going to take just a little wrench and pull these legs off of the hip bones. I want to be able to use these parts individually. And I'm just kind of laying things out, just trying to get an idea of what might work, where things would fit. So like that first pair of the larger legs, I'll keep going out the back. These other ones will be like the first set of back legs. And I wasn't real sure if I was going to do 8 legs or just the 6. And I ended up going with 6 legs, and then I was going to do 2 arms. Just trying to think about where I could put them. I could have drilled holes in the side of the pumpkin and had them come directly off of that. So once I had the idea and a rough layout, I had to start assembling everything. So I grabbed my drill, and I think about a 1/4 inch drill bit, and I'm going to use the existing bolts on the second set of legs and just bolt them through the hip bones, and then did the same exact thing on the other side. So as I was putting the legs on, this thing was pretty floppy and moving around all over the place. So I decided I need to stiffen up the joint a little bit. So I just grabbed a couple old paint sticks I had laying around and trimmed them to size with a little handsaw. And then just threw a couple screws in through the little plastic tabs on the hip bones. And this was just a temporary support, but stiffened it up quite a bit and did its job. Now on this third set of legs, where I'm using the hands as legs, the way the elbows bend, if I would use them as is, the hands would be upside down. So what they have is a little pin in there that's kind of just press fit into the plastic. So I took a hacksaw and my pliers. Once I was able to cut away some of the plastic, I could grab it with a pair of pliers and pull the pin out. And then it was just a matter of simply flipping the hand over and pushing the pin right back in the same spot. And to position this in the body, I just pre-drilled a hole on the hip bone and then just stuck a couple screws in there just to temporarily hold it where I wanted it. And then I did the same thing on the other one. And everything on this, the screws and all that, it's just to hold it temporary until I can get some Gorilla Glue on there. I'm just strictly mocking this up, trying to figure out what I wanted. And this whole project I just kind of designed as I went. I mean, the only thing I had the idea of is a spider or crab, whatever you want to call it. It's only got 6 legs. So, but yeah, I just kept, I'd step back, look at it, think of something new, and just constantly changing. So on this part, I'm just starting to fit up the body. I know I want the pumpkin as the body, and I'm going to use this foam skeleton head, and I want it to fit on the curvature of the pumpkin. So I just took a Sharpie and kind of eyeballed what I need to cut off to get it to sit correctly on the pumpkin. And then once I had that marked up, I just took my oscillating tool, my multi-tool with the hook blade on there, and just cut it off at the line. And this was just a rough cut. I just want to see how it fits. I'll trim it up a little bit when I do the final fit up. And in the way I placed this pumpkin, I wanted the stem of the pumpkin to kind of look like a stinger or a tail. And I think now that I'm watching it and doing this voiceover, I think if I was going to do it again, I would have put the pumpkin more vertical, straight up and down like a real pumpkin. And that would have saved me from having to cover up the hole in the bottom of the pumpkin. Trimming that off, it fit pretty well. I was happy with the way it was sitting. So once I was happy with that position, I just took my Sharpie and roughly marked it on there where the back of the head was, just so when I put it back together, I get it in the same spot. And as I'm staring at this, I'm thinking that I might want to add a light to it. When I built my tiki torches, I really liked the way that the foam glowed when you put a light inside. I think this thing would look pretty cool if it was glowing. So what I did is I grabbed just a socket. These are little 12-foot sockets I got on Amazon. They have a little switch on them. And then a flame bulb. So now I was playing around with how I wanted it to light up. I could have stuck it in the head or stuck it in the pumpkin, but the light didn't penetrate through both of them. So what I came up with was just cutting out a chunk of the pumpkin that's going to be sitting under the head. So I grabbed my oscillating tool again. I was hoping that it would remove enough foam that it would allow the light to pass up into the skull if I placed the light bulb inside the pumpkin itself. So I just took a pretty big chunk out of this. I left enough just to glue the skull on. And then as I was adjusting it, I still wasn't real happy with it. They both didn't glow at the same intensity. So trying it in the head, but having it split in between, I ended up being pretty happy with that. So now I had to figure out a way to attach the light bulb halfway in between the two. Taking my Sharpie again, marking out a little half circle around the foam that I just cut. And this will allow me to glue the light bulb halfway in between the pumpkin and the skull. And I also wanted the cord of this light to come out of the pumpkin. So what I did was I just drilled a hole right through the side of the pumpkin and then ran the cord out the bottom. And this will all get encapsulated in the foam later on. So once I had that cord running out the bottom, I ended up grabbing my glue gun and just temporarily attaching this bulb to the pumpkin just long enough so I can get some Gorilla Glue on there and get a good connection. One thing I've found is that hot glue does not really last here in Michigan. By the time Halloween comes and everything starts freezing and warming up and freezing again, everything that I hot glue falls apart. And then I checked my fit up again of the skull. I trimmed out a little bit more foam and then just proceeded to add some Gorilla Glue. Once I had it in its final place and all glued up, I just took some T-pins and shoved it through the skull and down into the pumpkin, just for a temporary hold until the glue sets. So the next thing I decided to do was add this extra hip bone I had. I needed to cut off a little bit of it just to get it to fit together with the other one. And what it's going to do is kind of create like a little cradle to help hold the pumpkin. And it also stiffened it up a little bit, so everything kind of sat nicely. So just using my oscillating tool, I just cut away pieces of it until I was happy with the way it fit. Once I had the hip bone all trimmed up in the way I wanted, I put a couple screws in it just to temporarily hold it in place. And then I took my drill again and put a couple holes through both hip bones and used a zip tie to pull them together and get them as tight as possible. And this really helped stiffen this whole thing up, kind of held everything in place and made a nice cradle for the pumpkin to sit in. And I didn't like the way that the second set of legs, the angle of them was coming off using just bolting it through the hip. So once I had both of these center legs pulled off, I just grabbed a weight that I had in the garage and put it on top of the hips. And what this did was help level it out and make it sit flat on the board. And once I was happy with the position of these four legs, I just went around with some Gorilla Glue, put quite a bit of glue into all the joints and every crack I could find to just get this to hold together and become more solid. And then also I put it into the knee joints as well, and this will just help lock these in place. I think I went back about 3 different times adding more glue. This stuff does foam up. If it wasn't making good contact in the joint, I just added more glue to it until it foamed up enough to seal the crack. And now that the glue had dried, it was actually stuck to the board pretty well. I would come back later and cut that off with a saw, but I started adding that second set of legs back in, and I decided not to use that bolt, that's existing bolt that's on the leg. What I ended up doing was just drilling a couple holes in the hip bone and running some zip ties around the leg and then putting a screw in there as well. But this allowed me to get the exact position that I wanted, the right angle, makes the foot sit flat on the ground, which I wasn't able to do before. And I just did that on both sides. And now I'm going to add the arms back in. I decided not to drill a hole in the body of the pumpkin. By adding this extra hip bone on the front, I basically reused the ball joints where the legs would come out of. So I just put a screw right through the same hole that the legs came out of into the ball of the arm. And I think it worked out pretty well. It kind of gave it a more natural look, like everything was coming out of the same spot. I just shoved it into position and then just ran a screw through it. And this just held it long enough for me to glue it. Also on these arms, I'm leaving the elbow and the wrist joints unglued. once I get it in the yard every year, I can move it around and position the hands how I want. And then once I had those screwed in, I just went back and put another round of Gorilla Glue everywhere just to make sure. So this was a few hours later. Everything had hardened up. I took my oscillating tool and basically cut everything free from the board I was working on. And now I'm just taking a clear plastic trash bag and putting it over the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to foam fill this body cavity, and this will just keep it from sticking to my workbench and hopefully control the amount of foam squish out that I have to deal with. So I just put the bag on, try to get it pretty tight just so it had less room to expand, and then threw a big rubber band I had laying around, and then I just flip it back over and start filling it with foam. And this stuff is the great stuff, the big gap and crack filler. I don't really like it because it expands for quite a while and you gotta mess with it. But for this type of situation, it works pretty well. So then I just proceeded to spray the foam inside, trying to fill all the little gaps, getting underneath all the bones. This will pretty much help hold everything together. The glue was just there to get it to this point. The foam's going to do most of the work. This was about 3/4 of a bottle of foam that I had left over. And I just put the whole bottle in there, spraying some water every once in a while just to help it seal up. I knew having the plastic on there, it was not going to harden very well on the bottom. So it actually took I think 2 days for it to completely harden up. And after a few minutes of just letting this expand, I grabbed my pumpkin body. I decided to just lay the cord in the foam and let it run out the backside. And then just pushed it down. I mean, it's sticky enough that it held onto this thing pretty well. I just spent a little bit of time kind of getting it laid out the way I wanted and making sure it's straight up and down. And then once the foam skinned over a little bit more, I just proceeded to go around and keep pushing it in back into the holes and reduce the amount of foam that I'd have to carve off in the end. And this was one of the reasons why I didn't like the big gap and crack filler, because it keeps expanding. Like the normal great stuff, you can smash it down and it might expand a little bit, but this stuff just keeps coming right back, and you pretty much have to mess with it until it gets hard. So once that was all set up, well, at least the outside was set up, the bottom didn't dry for a while. After staring at it for quite a bit, I decided I didn't really like the way that the bottom of the pumpkin has that big hole in it. So I thought maybe I could utilize that hole and turn it into like a throat or something. So what I ended up doing was just taking my Sharpie marker, drawing a couple lines on the skull where I wanted to cut it off. And what I'm going to do is just basically lower the jaw, kind of extend the jaw a little bit. So I just drew my line right up underneath the teeth and then across the jaw and the back. When I was happy with the line and how I thought it would look, I just took my oscillating tool and cut off the bottom jaw. And then once I had the jaw off, I placed a couple marks on the pumpkin where I thought the jaw looked good. And then I took my oscillating tool again and chunked out a little groove for it to sit in. This will allow it just to have more surface area to glue to. And also, while I had this apart, I took the time to clean out the extra foam on the lower jaw as well as the upper jaw, anything that was kind of blocking the light. And then when I was happy with the way the jaw fit in there, I just took my Gorilla Glue again and placed the jaw in with a couple T-pins, and this just held it in place long enough for the glue to dry. And one nice thing about projects like this, I mean, you can just grab any random pile of stuff you have in your garage or in your shop and just make something. There's no rules, just make something you think looks cool, and usually it does turn out pretty cool. And while the jaw was drying, I took my oscillating tool and cleaned up a little bit more in the upper mouth. I just wanted to get as much foam out of there as I could to help help the light kind of spread. So any large chunks that were blocking any light, I tried to get rid of that, or anything you might see that shouldn't really be there. And then what I was going to do is rebuild this jawbone. Now that it's extended, I was going to rebuild it out of foam. So what I did, I just took my Dremel tool with a little saw blade on there and cut a couple slits in the existing jaw, and just took some of these bamboo sticks I had laying around. You could probably use like a skewer or something. The only thing it's really going to be used for is supporting the spray foam, giving it something to stick to and some structure as you're trying to reshape the jaw. So yeah, just cut a slit on both sides. I cut my my stick to length, or sticks to length, and then just shoved them in the groove. I think I ended up putting a little Gorilla Glue on them, but it really didn't need it. It's just kind of like a press fit. And I did put them in there a little long because I wanted it to kind of bow out, just to make that mouth and the throat a little bigger, a little more round. And then I just did the same thing on both sides. And then I had to run out and buy some more spray foam. I think this was the only thing I actually bought for this project. So just another can of Great Stuff, the original one, not the large gap and crack one. And to start out, I'm trying to, what I was doing was I was trying to figure out how to seal the mouth and the throat. Originally, I had thought about putting in creepy cloth and just hanging it to block the light from being visible. But then I thought I could make a piece of foam thin enough to cover the roof of the mouth and also the throat. So right now, I just took a piece of plastic, sprayed some water on it. I'm going to make like a little triangle that would fit in the roof of the mouth. I was going to do this in small pieces because it was a fairly large opening, and I wasn't sure if this would like bridge the gap or not. So I just put down a single layer of foam, give it a few minutes to skin over. So when doing this, I should have waited a few more minutes. It was really still sticking to the plastic a lot. So as I was getting it peeled up, it kind of destroyed my shape, which it ended up working out okay because it's like playing with a marshmallow. You could stretch it back to whatever shape you wanted. And then once I had it off, I tried to thin it out as much as I could and then just put it up in there, getting it to stick to the roof of the mouth, and then just stretched it out to make it work. And my goal here was just to make a really thin piece of foam, even if it had a few holes in it, and just something to cover the mouth, but also allow the light to shine through it. So yeah, I just kind of shoved it up in there, stretched it out, pushed it in on both sides until it stuck. And then just once I had it relatively where I wanted it, I just kind of kept pushing on it to make it concave, kind of make it like a true roof of the mouth where you can't really see it, but it just gets pushed up in there. So once that roof of the mouth hardened up, I was going to try something a little different on the throat because the throat's so large. Spanning that big gap would be quite difficult. So I took my oscillating tool again, cleaned up any extra foam that I didn't want in the throat area, and chopped off a little bit of the foam I just put in. So now that the throat was opened up and I had as much room in there as I thought I could get, I took this orange mat that I had. I don't know what it's called, but I think it was from the dollar store from a previous project. It's kind of like a compressed grass, and my purpose for using this is just to give something for the foam to stick to, since I'm covering such a large gap. So what I did, I just hot glued the corners in and kind of held it in place the best I could. And then once everything was together, I just grabbed my spray foam again and put in a single layer across the whole mouth, starting from the bottom, kind of working my way up, making sure it was sticking. I did add a little bit of water to the mat as well, just to help it cure. And then once that was all sprayed up and in there, I just sat there and babysat it for a little while, kept pushing on it, trying to keep that concave throat look. I didn't want it to puff up and just be a flat surface. And then after about 15 minutes, that actually got hard enough to stay where I wanted it. And now it was time to move on to the jaw. So for the jaw, it's kind of the same thing. Just put a layer of foam on and then just give it a few minutes to skin over and then just start shaping it. When I was doing this, I was trying to rebuild that original jaw structure. So I went off the parts where I cut it on the jawbone and kind of used that as a guide of how big it should be. And I just grabbed popsicle sticks, used my hands, and just kept working with it until I was happy with it. And then just doing the same thing on the other side. So this is a couple days later. Everything's all dried up, and I took the plastic bag off. And I'm just taking a razor knife and a Sureform tool and just carving off any big chunks, trying to expose the bone and just clean up the base a little bit. And I just work my way around the whole base. It's going to sit flat on the grass, so I left the bottom of it alone. After I had all the major chunks taken off, I took my Dremel tool and just went around and kind of dug out different areas just to help expose that bone and clean it up some more. One thing I did do when it came to shaping the jaw was once I used the Sureform tool on it, it was pretty rough. So I just came back with a little sandpaper and smoothed that out the best I could. Now that I was happy with the way all the foam was looking, it's time to paint. This is just some Oops paint from Home Depot. I've used it on quite a few projects. The way I want to paint it is I want the paint to be thick enough to block a lot of the glow and the light through the foam. But yet I want all the cracks and deep grooves on the pumpkin to not get paint on them, which will allow it to just glow in certain areas. So what I tried to do was just keep the brush really flat against the surface and not poke into any grooves. I would just work my way around the entire thing, giving it a good coat of paint. And towards the end here, you can see better of what I was going for. I wanted the eyes to glow, the mouth to glow, and all these deep grooves. For the next step, I didn't really like the way that the knee joints were looking. They just look real fake. So I just took some creepy cloth from the dollar store and basically just cut out small pieces and wrapped it around the legs and the different joints. And I didn't glue them on or anything like that. I'm going to spray paint this whole thing, so I just kind of counted on the spray paint as that's what's going to hold it together, kind of glue it together, just to give it a little different look and give it some texture. After the base coat of paint dried, I took it outside, grabbed a couple of cans of white spray paint. This was I don't know what brand it was. It was really cheap paint, so it took about 4 or 5 cans to completely coat this entire thing. I just applied it really thick, trying to cover everything. I put a lot of paint on the creepy cloth just to get it to stick down to the bones, and just worked my way around the whole thing, making sure it was all completely coated. And once I had used up all my cheap paint, I let it dry for a little bit and then came back with a coat of Rust-Oleum, the 2X primer, or the 2X spray paint. And this covers much better. Only took about half a can to do the second coat. So once this was all dry, I brought it back inside and I plugged it back in to see how much the white paint covered. And I still wanted it to glow quite a bit more in the eyes and the deeper cracks and crevices. So I just took my Dremel tool and a little ball head bit and just kind of ground off a little bit of that paint, trying to expose some of the foam, get the light to shine through. And then once I was happy with the way it was glowing, I grabbed couple different colors of orange paint and a little sea sponge, and I just dabbed it all around the pumpkin part. What I'm trying to do here is keep the bone look, but have a little bit of a little hint of orange. I ended up adding a little bit too much orange to this pumpkin, more than I wanted. So in the next few steps, I just came back and wiped it down a little bit and wiped some of that color off. And for this next part, I just took some black paint and put it in a cup with a little bit of water and made like a black wash. And with this, I'm going to go over the entire thing, and this will just help bring out some of the little cracks and crevices and kind of tone down the white a little bit. I put a few coats in the eyeballs and in the mouth just to try to make that as black as possible. And it's still thin enough that the light's going to shine through it. But you just put a little bit on, take your paper towel or cloth, and then wipe it off. And whatever sticks will be your low points. And it just helps bring out all that extra texture. Yeah, one thing about doing this too, if you're not happy with the way it's looking, you can always just add more coats of paint and just build up layers slowly. Or if you think you added too much, you could just spray some water on your paper towel and wipe off even more. And once I was happy with the black, I mixed up some burnt umber and did the same thing. And what this does is it'll just give it like kind of a dirty, grimy look. And this will just continue to settle into the low points and kind of make those stand out a little bit better. And when I was doing the brown, I did put it on the pumpkin itself, and this is where I kind of wiped off some of that orange just to tone down the color a little bit. And then for the final paint step, I just took I think it's a khaki color, kind of bone color, and just went back with a dry brush and hit some of the highlights. And I also put a little bit on the pumpkin to kind of blend the bone and the pumpkin together. And I just worked my way around the whole thing, just touching the highlights. And while I was doing this, it started raining. So the last step I didn't show, but I went back I took it back outside with some clear lacquer and just put a coat over the entire thing just to help protect the paint from the rain and snow or whatever weather we might see in October. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this project. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.